I want to talk about Mercedes. I want to talk about George Russell in particular, and also Max Verstappen as well. I want to talk about the rumours that are circulating, that are doing the rounds in the paddock about these two potentially doing a bit of a swap deal, potentially, or at least Max Verstappen anyway, coming into that Mercedes team and being their new lead driver as soon as 2026. Now, I'll be completely honest with you guys. When I first heard these rumours, I thought, it's just typical paddock gossip. There's not really going to be any realistic chance of this actually happening. But over the past few weeks or so, and particularly at the Austrian Grand Prix the other week, the rumours have pretty much manifested themselves as an open secret at this point. To the point where George Russell is basically admitting that Max Verstappen is having talks with Mercedes, that he is potentially going to move there as soon as next year. But is this likely to happen? Is this possible this is going to happen? Because there's been a lot of noise recently in the media, particularly UK media, about how Mercedes are holding George Russell back. They're not announcing that he's renewed his contract for 2026 and beyond, and it's an absolute travesty. After all, he's having a really good season. I'd say he's probably having his best season in Formula 1 right now, and he's not that far behind Max Verstappen in the World Championship, which is really saying something when it comes to his skill level. He's really taken on the mantle of becoming the team leader at Mercedes ever since Sir Lewis Hamilton, of course, has left to go to Ferrari. But is this going to be his only season as the lead driver of Mercedes? Well, I'm going to talk about that here, guys. I'm going to give some of my thoughts on it because there's a few different ways that you can look at this. There really, really is. There's a lot of different factors here at play, and what you think is going to happen really does depend on your kind of viewpoint about how the relationship works, not only between Max Verstappen and Toto Wolff, but also Verstappen and Red Bull, Russell and Red Bull as well, and also on top of that too, the relationship between Verstappen and Russell. And let's just touch on that first of all. There are some people out there that are suggesting it is possible that potentially George Russell and Max Verstappen could become teammates at Mercedes. But I don't think there's any realistic chance of that happening for a number of different reasons. The biggest one, of course, is the elephant in the room in the form of the fact that these two don't really get on with each other too well. There's not been that many flashpoints this season relatively. There is one very notable exception, of course, at the Spanish Grand Prix where they collided, and they very much did not have the same opinion about what had happened there. Verstappen, though, to his credit, later relented. He later apologised for it, said, look, I messed up there. I did something I shouldn't have done, and we move on from it. But still, it's not the only incident between these two out on track. Not by any means whatsoever. The one in Qatar last year, really, really nasty between the two of them, I do think. It's one thing to hit each other out on track when, tempers are boiling and everything like that. But for an incident like that, where you're arguing against each other in the steward room like that's when it stops being professional and it feels very much personal. So I personally don't think there is any chance of them being teammates at Mercedes next year. And on top of that as well, you've also got to factor Kimi Antonelli into this as well. Now, he very much is the young prodigy at that Mercedes team, and he's doing a really good job in my opinion this season. Yes, he is not on the same level as George Russell, but he is still a rookie. He has a lot of time still to progress. He's 18 years old, for goodness sake. He's just took his final school exams. The man was still doing classes and stuff in his Italian equivalent of A-levels or GCSEs or whatever he was doing at that time. I don't think there's any chance that Kimi Antonelli is going to move. And I also think from a financial point of view as well, having two top earners on the books is going to cost more. Mercedes, of course, can afford that. But, Antonelli, from a wages point of view, is not going to be on anything like what Russell is. And, Antonelli, with the way he's going, very early days, but he could well be a world champion in the future. Russell, at his age, he's not old by any means, but at his age, obviously, he will improve less than what Antonelli will over the next 5 years or so. So I think really that Antonelli is going to stay. He's not confirmed, of course. Neither driver is confirmed yet at Mercedes for next year, but I would pretty much stick my house on the fact that I believe that Kimi Antonelli will be in one of those two seats next season. I don't see why Toto Wolff would bin him off like that. But Russell is a very different story. Like I said, he's doing really well this season, but a lot of people are trying to make out like this is unusual behaviour from Mercedes. Why are they leaving it so late into the season to announce that he either will or will not get a contract extension. And I kind of disagree with what people are saying on this. See, George Russell and Toto Wolff, to their credit, have always said, look, this is not the time of the season when we make these announcements. Those come later in the year. And again, a lot of people are not really looking into the facts when it comes to this. People are acting like Sir Lewis Hamilton announcing that he signed for Ferrari a full year before he actually joined them is the norm. With the exception of Ferrari and at times also McLaren in the past, these deals are not announced this early. For the most part, it does take a kind of flashpoint, a trigger point, for lack of a better term, to really ensure that these deals are done so early in the season. You know, silly season traditionally used to start in Monaco. Silly season, of course, being the term where all these contracts are being signed and the teams are going around like a merry-go-round and the drivers are making their moves. Traditionally, the start of that was Monaco, but in recent years, it has been even before pre-season testing start. That's when silly seasons start. So a lot of teams are very much doing their business a lot early in the year. And indeed, a lot of the grid is already set for 2026. But Mercedes are a notable exception. At the time of recording, they are one of only 3 teams to have not signed any drivers yet for 2026. The others being Red Bull's sister team, the Racing Bulls, which is kind of standard for them, and the new Cadillac Racing team as well. They have not announced either of their new drivers yet. But is it unusual for Russell to be getting a contract extension this late in the season? Are they taking longer than usual? Well, no, actually. You look at the history of George Russell. When he was announced in 2021 to be driving for Mercedes in 2022, that announcement was made in September 2021. Similarly as well, his recent contract extension, the most recent one that he's got, that was announced in August 2023, which obviously carries him through to the end of 2025. Kimi Antonelli, he was announced back in August as well last year to be driving this year. And if you even look at Sir Lewis Hamilton, when he first joined Mercedes as well, he was announced, I believe, around Monza, Singapore sort of time. So that deal was also done in September 2012 for 2013. That's how long ago it was now. So this is typical of Mercedes to leave it to this point in the calendar. And there are some different reasons why you would want to do this. Obviously, you want to motivate your drivers. You want to ensure that they're still performing. They're not kind of resting on their laurels. Not that you would accuse George Russell of doing that, but that is the kind of thinking behind actually waiting a little longer. Now, Russell has been getting itchy feet about this. He has been kind of saying, look, I'd much rather these negotiations be finished by now. Why are they still going on? And he's also freely admitted, as of the Austrian Grand Prix, that Mercedes are talking to Max Verstappen, and that is, of course, making things more awkward for him. And indeed, this is nothing new. Mercedes trying to get Max Verstappen is a tale as old as time at this point. Many people will point to last year, of course, when Hamilton signed for Ferrari and Verstappen was looking unhappy at Red Bull. But it goes back way further than that. In fact, Toto Wolff almost signed Verstappen before Red Bull did. The only difference is the deciding factor in that decision was that Red Bull gave Max Verstappen a seat at Toro Rosso in 2015. Mercedes could not provide that. They had Hamilton and Nico Rosberg both contracted for 2015 and beyond, so they couldn't provide him with an F1 seat. It would have purely been a test and reserve role. That was the decisive factor, and that is also part of the reason why Wolff was so keen to sign Antonelli on as well. And then we've got to talk about Max Verstappen's contract as well with Red Bull. Now, it may be the case that Mercedes are waiting a normal amount of time to make these decisions when it comes to signing their drivers. That's not unusual, right? I want to leave you in no doubt about that. That is absolutely, completely not unusual. If we get to around September, October time, then we're getting into the verges of it being a bit unusual. Right now, in July, we're fine. There's no kind of oddity around that, for lack of a better term. But where things get a bit interesting is Max Verstappen. Now, if you look at the drivers that are signed on for 2026, you'll notice Max Verstappen is signed on. Indeed, reportedly, his Red Bull contract runs until the end of the 2028 season. So then a lot of people will say, well, contracts in Formula 1 are only as good as the paper they are written on. And that is true to an extent. But unfortunately for Mercedes, if they were trying to sign Verstappen up, they would have to pay a lot of money to Red Bull, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars to get him out of his contract. They would effectively have to pay whatever is owed to him in wages to Red Bull for the remainder of what that deal would be. 3 years of Verstappen, that is a 9-figure deal at least. But again, there are reports of potentially performance clauses in that Red Bull contract. Now, again, we don't know what these are. It's all a mystery. But there are rumours that if Red Bull finish in 4th place in the Constructors' Championship, if they finish outside of the top 3, or if Max Verstappen is a certain number of points behind the championship leaders, which he's a long way behind the championship leaders at this point, and he's not going to go catching them. And if you look at how far McLaren are ahead in the Constructors, Red Bull are not going to catch them. They're going to do very well to get second. And indeed, at the moment, they are in 4th place. And even though Mercedes had a really poor result at Silverstone, that gap is almost 40 points. And effectively, Red Bull are fighting with one hand tied behind the back. Yuki Tsunoda is not scoring points regularly, not even scoring points really at all at the moment. So if there are performance clauses in there, Verstappen could activate that and leave for Mercedes for a relative cut price deal. It's all paddock gossip, it's all rumours, but there's definitely something to it. The fact that Russell is responding to these questions and saying these things in public now, there is clearly something to it. Of course, you could always take the kind of cynical view that this is potentially just Toto Wolff trying to motivate his drivers and stuff like that, trying to get them to perform better. But frankly, they're performing really well, I think, on the whole, to be honest. You know, if anything, the only thing that's letting down Mercedes right now is the car. You know, you can't question the fact that as a rookie, Antonelli has had an incredible season, and as an experienced pro, George Russell is having a great campaign as well. But there we go, guys. Those are my kind of thoughts on it. There's a lot of different moving parts here. There's something to it. But on the balance of things, do I think that Verstappen is going to go to Mercedes? No. If I had to put money on it, I would say no. I think that he will want to stick around at Red Bull for 2026, see how they go with a new regulation set, with a new car that is actually designed rather than just trying to work on one that Adrian Newey made. I think that could be a decisive factor and could, of course, lead to them getting an uptick in their performance. But I also understand why he potentially wants to jump ship right now at Red Bull. They've lost their lead designer. Their second driver's not doing particularly well. And you've also got the war of words going on, you know, the fractious relationship between the Verstappens, Horner, the hierarchy at Red Bull, Marco also involved. There's a lot of politics in there too. You know, there's a lot of questions really when it comes to the stability of that team. It doesn't seem like somewhere that is very harmonious right now to go and race. But yeah, your thoughts are appreciated in the comments below, guys. I want to hear what you have to say about this. How likely do you think it is that Verstappen is going to go to Mercedes? And do you think that would be a good fit? Do you think he'd win championships at Mercedes if they provide the car? I think he absolutely would, yeah. You know, he's a proven multiple champion at this point. The guy is winning pretty much anything. Hell, he's winning in this Red Bull as well every now and again, which is an absolutely terrible car for the most part. So unreliable. But yeah, your thoughts in the comments below, guys. See you soon. Hope you enjoyed this longer discussion because, yeah, there's a lot to cover when it comes to this, and we've not heard the end of it by any means yet. Watch Russell get announced for 2026 at Mercedes now I've made this video. I'm calling it. It's going to happen.